Welcome back to Adaptive Humans, the podcast for real talk and intentional growth. I'm your host, Jami de Lou. We navigate a range of topics on Adaptive Humans, all grounded in growing our emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, and nervous system regulation, because they help us stay human when life gets real. Today's episode is for anyone in the middle of a change at work. In particular, layoffs, reorganizations, maybe new bosses, shifting budgets, whatever you're experiencing right now. When thinking about this topic and talking with so many people who I know have been impacted by layoffs, government shutdown furloughs, the consistent part of each person's story that resonated a lot with me was that moment they found out, the shock and uncertainty. Maybe it was an email announcing it, or that last minute calendar invite from your boss. And when you log into the video call, suddenly you see someone from HR is also there. Or maybe you're the one who stayed and the silence is heavy. Or maybe you lead a team and you're trying to steady yourself while also steadying others. I wanted to come to this episode with practical solutions of things that might help you, in particular in those first 72 hours when everything is kind of spinning in your mind and happening simultaneously. The idea of this is not about spinning the situation. It's about naming what's true, sorting through what's next, and practicing small moves that return you to yourself. What I hope you'll walk away with this episode is that 72-hour plan and maybe a few tiny tools that you can use today or when you find yourself in this unfortunate situation. Let's take one breath together. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Okay, let's begin. Beyond the bio. This is where we go beyond the titles and resumes to understand the person and lived experience that happens in the realness of day-to-day life. As I shared in the episode about navigating the Q4 storms, I myself have navigated my fair change of that messy middle in the midst of layoffs, reorgs. I've been the leader navigating through it, and I've been the employee impacted. And while there's widespread impacts right now, I'd be remiss if I didn't take a minute to talk about and really think about the brilliant inclusion, diversity, and equity professionals across sectors, industries, and experience levels that have been impacted over the course of the last year. It's easy for us to maybe think, oh, well, the DEI thing and have this acronym that we maybe don't understand and frankly has been weaponized. But there are real humans with an incredible depth of expertise, many of whom have spent 10, 15, 20 years across industries and professions, really making an impact and helping the talent processes, the people and culture, and the business processes in multitude of organizations be better and do better, be more inclusive, be more representative, be spaces where more people can have access to employment, bring the perspective of neurodiversity and LGBTQ inclusion and all the different ways in which many different identities, cultures, and people come to the workplace fully as who they are, wanting the same opportunities to make an impact and to thrive. And so I just want to talk about while some companies might be staying the course and keeping their teams, in this current environment, so many of us, and this is my profession and my experience, so many of us have been impacted by roles being eliminated, or there's been a quiet reorganization and realignment of the role in a way that is asking that professional to sell a particular path forward that doesn't align with the intention of the work. And so those individuals are having to make tough decisions for themselves. So either in both instances, the company decides or the individual practitioner decides. But what we have are highly, highly educated, highly intelligent, culturally aware practitioners who no longer have roles and are now pivoting in a job market that is already complex and the roles that they've been contributing with don't exist right now. Now, I could do a whole episode just on this, and I'm not going to hyper focus on this, but I think because it's my lived experience and so many of the practitioners around me, and I think about you could say the same for scientists who maybe were at the NIH or the CDC, and others and other different professions who are being impacted in this time space continuum that we're living in. And so while this episode won't dive into all those long term effects, I want to get at normalizing the experience that you're having when this change occurs and what you can do to support yourself in the midst of it. Or if you're a leader navigating it and still inside of an organization, how you can support your people, both the person you're supporting that's leaving and the people who are staying. Anyone who's experienced this knows what happens. You get that calendar ping, it has a vague subject line. The message lands like a stone. Maybe it says org update or restructuring or new priorities, or you get invited to an all department meeting or some kind of town hall. Even if you're keeping your job, something in you can feel unsteady in this moment because work isn't just a role. It's an identity, it's community, it gives us purpose, it creates a rhythm in our lives. And it's not just professional identity that shakes in these moments. For many of us, work is deeply tied to the role that we play in our families and our cultures. Maybe you're the first in your family to make it into a professional environment or into a leadership role. And now you're wondering, have I let everyone down? Maybe you've come from a culture where stability and providing are core values, and this kind of uncertainty makes you feel like a failure. Or maybe you're the person everyone turns to, the steady one, and you're quietly thinking, who takes care of me when I'm the one who's not okay? If that shame is starting to whisper, you should have seen this coming, or you're falling behind, just know that that is not truth. That's your nervous system trying to find a sense of control. The antidote to all of this is actually connection. And while shame, blame, fear, all those different things can have a tendency to want us to isolate ourselves, if you can step into connection, tell one trusted person what is actually true for you right now. Even a single sentence, it breaks the spiral that's happening in our minds and in our body's nervous system. When these life quakes happen, your nervous system does exactly what it's designed to do. It wants to protect you, and it thinks it's doing that through fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And we're going to talk about and break down what each of these look like and can show up in these instances in just a minute. But if this resonates with you today, I just want to remind you that fight, flight, fawn, freeze response, you are not broken. Your body is trying to help you. Our job is to listen to, lean into it, and then lead ourselves through these circumstances with care. Before you go into overdrive, trying to plan out every next step and go into crisis management, you must pause and steady yourself. After I share a quick overview of that fight, flight, fawn, and freeze responses, I'll also share a 72-hour plan, what you can do in the first 3 days of having a massive life change like this occur. And finally, we'll talk about a few resets you can do as a part of our Just Be Reset segment. Let's dig into the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and how that shows up at work and in our life transitions. I want to put plain language to what your body might do when that meeting ping that we talked about hits. Let's start with fight. This is where your mind-body connection is trying to protect you through pushing back. For example, maybe you get the laid off or meet now ping, and you feel that surge of anger. Maybe you feel that sharp tone. You're debating every decision that is in the room, firing off point by point rebuttals to someone. Or if you're a survivor of the reorg and you're still inside, you may argue every new priority, respond with a spike of impatience, or try to micromanage to regain control. Alternatives to the fight mode: instead of reacting within that fight mode, consider a self care cue. What that means is notice what's coming up. Are you feeling that heat in your jaw, face, neck, a tension? What you can do to combat this is exhale longer than you inhale. So you go in for 4 and out for a count of 8. All of this can take 60 to 120 seconds, but just by doing that activity of breathing can make all the difference in the world. An alternative is also a sample script that you can create for yourself. And this is a way to buy yourself time to process what's happening. So, an easy script you could use is: I'll have more to say after I've processed this. Can we schedule a follow up meeting? You do not have to react and have all the answers in the precise moment that you get the information about the change that's occurring. Next, we talk about flight. This is your mind body's way of trying to protect through escaping. And examples of what this could be is: if you're laid off or get that ping, you might avoid opening the email or disappear from Slack or start doom scrolling for hours on end. If you're the reorg survivor, you may overbook meetings or chase busy work to avoid one-on-ones. Alternative approaches can be things like a self-care cue. This is where you want to notice: are you feeling extra restless? Do you have the urge to multitask, where you're divided on so many things that you feel like you're not making progress? When we get to the Just Be reset, I'll share a little bit about a 12-minute one screen sprint, and we'll get into that more later. A potential script you could use in this scenario is: I'll review this and send one question and one recommendation by X time. You want to be specific, and then you have to hold yourself to that deadline you've given yourself. But again, you're buying yourself a little bit of time and space and giving yourself the capacity to think through how you're going to respond to the next steps. Next, we talk about freeze. This is your mind body's way of trying to protect you through pausing. It's pausing, processing, or engaging in what is actually occurring. And when this happens, if you've had that layoff scenario, your mind goes blank in the meeting. You may not be able to recall words. You may say, I'm fine, but you can't retain any information about what's actually occurring in the situation. Or if you're a reorg survivor, you may stare at the screen and you can't prioritize, and it feels like time is just slipping away from you. A really good self-care cue here to understand if this is happening to you is: notice if you're feeling numb, kind of disassociated. Is your breath really shallow? You could do an orienting reset in this scenario. And this is where you do that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you take 5 things you can see and you name them. What are 4 things that you can feel? What are 3 things around you that you can hear? And what are 2 things you can smell and 1 thing you can taste? That orienting reset will help you reconnect with your current environment by yourself in a safe capacity before you engage with others. And then the other thing you could do as an action is open your notes and title it "The Next 24 Hours." Next, we have the fawn. This is where the mind body wants to protect through pleasing others. If you're in that laid off scenario, you may over apologize or volunteer to do extra transition work that you don't even have the capacity for. If you're the reorg survivor, you may say yes to everything to try to be a team player, but then that's when burnout creeps in. So alternatives to consider: a self-care cue is notice that automatic yes versus that time and space you give yourself to reflect and actually decide whether or not you have the capacity to do something or volunteer for extra work. A potential script in this scenario is: I want to be supportive. I can do X by Friday, Y by next Wednesday. What's most useful for you? What you're doing here is you're giving a boundary and a choice in the scenario, but you're being clear about what you have the capacity to do while also giving the person that you're partnering with some choice in the matter as well. These are all protective reflexes. You do not control which one activates you. It is more about noticing them. And then when we name them, we can channel them into things like turning fight into advocacy, or flight into a focused action, or freeze into a pause and then plan. And lastly, fawn into a clear yes or a respectful no. With this awareness, let's go ahead and build a 72-hour plan you can start today. Brave enough moment. This is where we take that first step, even when you don't know where it is headed. You don't need to have a perfect plan. You need to have a good enough next step for the hours and days that are ahead of you. And this works whether you're laid off, the surviving teammate, or a manager. So I'll try to give examples for each scenario as we walk through these 3 days. Take whatever serves you from this idea and consider what else it might probe for yourself to say that this works better for me. There's no one size fits all here. In day one, in that initial reaction, this is triage. So if you were laid off or reassigned unexpectedly, a couple things that you can do immediately for yourself. Just stop and take, even if it's an hour of time, and write down benefits and cash flow. List out health coverage deadlines, severance details, monthly must pays. What does your runway look like? Maybe even choose one cost to pause. This is where you can separate the facts from the spinning that might start to occur, the worry that is ensuing, the worry that is an absolutely natural reaction, but one that you can curb by feeling like you can objectively look at the facts and understand then how you create the plan. So that first hour is really just about putting some facts down on a piece of paper in front of you to organize what is real in your current circumstances and what do you actually need to know. Next, you want to take like 15 minutes and just organize your contacts. Make sure you export them if you've had them on some device that you're no longer going to have access to, if you still have access to be able to do that. And star your top 10, the people you know that you want to follow up with when you have a moment. The next thing you can do is make 2 calls. One, a practical person, and one is your empathetic person. Many people talk about this idea of having your own personal board of directors or your kitchen cabinet, the people that you go to in times of need. And hopefully, ideally, you have some people in your cabinet, if you will. And so draw on the person that will both give you empathy and a person that will give you really practical, tactical advice or perspective and listening. That will help you reorient yourself to the next phase and the next steps of the things you have to do. The next step is about regulating. So these are the times when you're taking action, but you're also kind of feeling out of sorts. These are where doing things like putting your hand on your chest and on your belly and go in for 4 and out for 8, 10 times, and whisper to yourself, I can move one thing today. I can turn over one stone today. This is a way to help regulate yourself, as well as that positive affirmation is getting your mind and your mindset into a space where you can take action and feel empowered to advocate for yourself. If you're a manager or survivor still in the organization, here are 3 actions that you could take. It might look like a 30-minute window where you do a clarity check. And the clarity check, if you're still there, is really writing down what has changed, what didn't, and what's unknown. Literally 3 columns you can create for yourself. What changed, what didn't, and what is unknown. This helps you know more about what actions and steps and information that you need to be able to know how you're going to proceed. The next thing is that human sweep. So set aside another 30 minutes. Who's most impacted by what is occurring? Who needs a check-in or a one-on-one today? And then you need to take some time, especially if you're a leader, which is what is the team message that you're going to send out? It could be something like, we're still processing here. But here's what I know, and here's what I don't know. You control what and when you share, and I'll protect your privacy. That could be something that you say to the person who's been impacted if you're a manager. Or you could offer something like the goal for this week is to stabilize. And by Friday, send your 3 priorities and one thing that you need to pause in order to be able to move forward. That's your message to someone who's staying, but role has been impacted by the departures of colleagues. Let's move to day 2. This is where you're kind of doing what we call a meaning map. And this is where you can draw 3 columns and go dig deeper into kind of what we alluded to on day 1, which is what's ending. So be specific. What roles, rituals, assumptions, what is ending for you? And this can be both for a person who is staying and a person whose role has been eliminated or has been downsized or reorged. In the second column, that what stays, this is the skills, relationships, values, and routines. So regardless of what's happening for you in this transition, you are still who you are. You still have the same skills, the same relationships, values that you've always had. And some you might even hone newly through this experience. But that's the core of who you are. And being able to write those things down is a really good way to reinforce that you know who you are and you know what you bring to the table. And then the third column is what's next for now. Those small, doable moves. Who do I need to contact? Who might I make a list to reach out to? And then draft a message to your inner circle. If you're laid off, maybe that message looks something like, hey, I just want to share a quick update with my network. My role was eliminated. I'm doing okay and I'm building next steps. I am planning to explore new roles. If someone comes to mind that you think would be a good person for me to connect with based on the skills you know about me, could you think about 2 to 3 people you might introduce me to in the next couple weeks? I want to acknowledge that in some industries, using the phrasing, I'm in transition, is really common. And I actually find that across industries, it's a very common way of phrasing what you're doing. So instead of leading with, I was laid off yesterday, or I was recently laid off, or I was recently downsized, you can lead in with, I'm in transition of my role. And here's what I know that I bring to the table, and here's what I'm looking for. If you follow on to that story, you may talk about how you got to the place of transition, but it puts you in a position where when you're leading with your opening, you're not opening up with what you just specifically experienced, but instead you're talking about the space with which you're now in, which is, I'm in transition. Here's what I'm looking for, and here's what I know that I can bring to the table and solve for. It not only helps the other person have some really concrete information and how to help you and support you, but it's also more empowering to you based on what your circumstances are. The other thing I want to mention is in some instances, your role have been eliminated, but the company wants you to message it that you decided to leave. There is no right or wrong answer when this occurs. This is between you, your boss, the situation, whatever potential legal agreement you might be signing to decide how and why and how you want to message this going forward. There is absolutely no shame in whatever you decide and doing what is best for you. The biggest thing that you want to do is frame it in a way that keeps peace and keeps your sense of professionalism intact. So you leave the exact way that you came into the organization, with your integrity, with your skill set, with your aptitudes, and with your relationships that you've built intact as you transition into whatever you do next. If you're still at an organization after a reorg or a layoff situation, you may want to reach out to people in your network as well. And you could lead with something like, my company recently went through a reorganization. I'm taking some time to recalibrate and understand the priorities and what that means next for me and my team. If you've done this, may I have a 15-minute call with you to be able to talk more about how you approach that kind of situation to make sure that I'm thinking through things in the best way that I can. Or if you're a manager who's navigating this scenario, you may use something like asking, what do you need most this week? And what can I take off of your plate by Friday? When you meet with each of your employees one on one, or if you meet with them in a group, taking that action actually shows them that you care and you recognize that it's just not business as usual. When people are still staying after a reorganization happens, people are impacted by this, whether it's in a shift in workload, the personal relationships that they have. People need time to process and they need to know that their manager supports them. Now we move to day 3. This is where you want to start to get some momentum around your next steps. 3 reach outs. What's one warm intro that you can try to get? What's one chat with someone who's navigated a similar change? And what's one offer to help someone else? That third one is actually kind of important because sometimes you can feel helpless or hopeless in a moment or two around this is happening. You're questioning a lot of things. And so when you feel like you can help someone else in the midst of this, it's not required, but it actually might help give you some sense of purpose in a time when you might feel like your purpose is a little bit lost. One non-negotiable that you want to do in this time when all of this is happening is prioritizing taking care of you. So that means prioritizing sleep, getting outside the best you can for a walk, whether you engage in therapy, prayer, meditation, or you happen to have a coach. All of this is really important to surround yourself with the support systems that you need. And I would say calendar it. It is a natural instinct sometimes in moments of change that your mind and body might try to go into overdrive to get everything done, to go above and beyond before you leave. And you just are over prioritizing all of these things that you have to get done. And you're neglecting what actually needs the most attention, which is you in this scenario. So be gentle with yourself and really try to cultivate your capacity to make sure that you can navigate not only this initial transition in the first 72 hours, but the days and months and weeks that are going to be ahead of that. If you are a manager, you definitely want to take time to prioritize that in that first 30 days, how are you going to help your team transition? What support do you need to give to the team? What do you need to absorb or have someone else absorb, or what work is just going to be put on the back burner? Thinking of this in the priorities of 3s, meaning I'll do A, B, and C, plus this is now something that's being completely off the table and being delayed. Pick one thing per day that's just enough to move you in that next direction, whether you're the person that's been laid off, the team member being impacted, or the manager navigating all of this. Each person has a role to play in all of this, and each person is impacted by these transitions. Next, we have our Just Be reset. This is where we take a moment to reset and support our mind-body connection. This is as critical as ever when you're in a moment of transition. What I want to do is talk about 3 micro tools that can help you steady your own internal system so that your brain, body, mind connection can all work together again. First, I want to share this combination of both boxed breathing and name the feeling, name the need. Boxed breathing is an activity where you breathe in the sets of 4. So what that looks like is you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. So as you breathe in, you want to take that deep breath in for 4, hold your breath for 4, exhale slowly out for 4, and then hold that breath all the way out for 4. And as you do this, you can also complete the cycle of each one with an I feel and I need. Examples of this could look like I feel overwhelmed and I need one clear next step. Or I feel guilty and I need a boundary I can keep. If you feel frozen in what's occurring, something that might actually help you before trying the boxed breathing scenario that I just shared is actually going back to that orient of the 5 things that I mentioned before. This is where 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. Again, the idea is to help get your mind body connection back into a place where your nervous system is starting to get more regulated than dysregulated. The second micro tool I want to share is this idea of one screen, one task. Some people call it the 12-minute focus sprint. So, what you do is you close everything, choose one task that you can move 1% forward. And what that looks like is you set a timer for yourself for 12 minutes and do only that task. And at the end of it, you can say to yourself, I moved the needle by fill in the blank. What did you do in that sprint? Again, I moved the needle by that one thing you just did in the sprint. And if that feels like it works for you and you have some momentum, an option is to do a second sprint. But what you want to do is get up, stretch for 2 minutes, move around a little bit in this 2-minute window, and then sit back down and repeat the activity. 12 minutes on, one thing you focus on, and end it with, I move the needle by. You'd be amazed how this activity can actually start to reorient you to feeling purposeful, feeling like you're taking action, and potentially for people who might feel frozen or having different reactions to the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, it really can help you feel like you're taking steps to move yourself forward. And then the third micro tool is 2 different text scripts that you could use that might help you take action for the scenario that you're walking through. So the first one is an asking for help script. It could look something like, hey, I'm navigating a reorg and charting my next steps. If there's 2 people that come to mind in X field, whatever that is for you, would you introduce me? Here's 3 bullets about my strengths and opportunities of what I'm looking for. I'll follow up with you, and I really appreciate your time. Short, sweet, simple, to the point. You want that outreach to be someone you know in your network, someone that you have established relationship, ideally, initially, because that will help you be more likely to get a response and get an engagement and feel that support system. The next is setting a boundary. And you want to be respectful and specific. This goes back to the example I shared earlier. I can do X by Friday or Y by Wednesday. What's most useful for you? To make it doable, I'll pause Z for this week. For managers, it's really important that if you hear your employee ask you for that and try to set that boundary, that you do your very best to be responsive to that and be supportive of that. The worst thing that can happen for someone who is still in an organization around a reorg is when they go to their manager to try to set up a way in which they can keep work going, but are very realistic about what they want to pause. When you react as a manager as if everything is an urgent priority right now and nothing can be paused and nothing can have boundaries around it, you are disempowering the employee. You are putting them into a situation that is only going to increase their stress levels, and it is going to decrease their productivity. So the very thing that you're trying to get to happen by the work still getting done isn't going to get done to the best of their ability and any faster than if you would have shown that boundaries actually can be relevant right now, things actually can be paused, and figuring it out. The other thing for managers that you can do is ask, what do you need most this week? And what can I do to support you? Or what can I do to take something off of your plate? Again, you're reinforcing that either they've come to you proactively and you're being responsive to it, or you are being proactive with them and not waiting, which is even better, to have to come to you, right? You're showing initiative to your team in the midst of this change. As we close, I just want to say that transitions ask us to be brave in small and honest ways. You have to feel out what's true, plan lightly, and steady our bodies and our minds so that our choices match our values. Our emotional intelligence helps us name what's real for us. Our cultural intelligence reminds us that people are experiencing change differently and may be impacted by things that are unique to them and their lived experience. And nervous system regulation keeps us steady enough to choose curiosity over reactivity in these circumstances. If you're experiencing this for the first time in your career, or it's the fifth time in your career, just know that blame and shame will not help you regulate. While they might be natural reactions to what's occurring, if you feel those come up, you're likely dysregulated. And so, what you want to do again is notice it, but don't judge it. And try one of the micro tools that I shared today. If this episode helped you, or you think it might help someone in your life, share it with them, or a manager who you think is trying to do right by the team, but could benefit from some support. Next week, we're going to be diving into support and advocacy work of a doula in support of maternal health with Leah Harrison of Sweet Bee Services. You won't want to miss this episode. I'm also prepping for an upcoming episode about navigating caregiving for elders in our life. I know many, many people who have experienced this or even going through this right now. And I really would love to hear from you. What questions do you have? What about caregiving challenges you most? What have you learned in your journey of caregiving? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. As always, adaptability starts with presence. It doesn't always feel easy to stay present in our current world. So take a breath and reset. Keep practicing connection with yourself and the people who help you take good care. Until next time, I am brave, I am enough, I am brave enough, and so are you. This is Adaptive Humans, real talk, intentional growth.